Have you ever felt the bitter sting of failure at the very moment you thought you had achieved perfection? The year was 1964. The Hong Kong sun was setting, casting long shadows across the demonstration hall. Before me sat the most renowned masters in Asia, men who could see through any pretense, any false mastery. My heart pounded against my chest, not from fear, but from an intensity that demanded expression. I had spent thousands of hours perfecting these movements, every angle calculated, every strike measured. My techniques were flawless, and that, my friend, was precisely the problem. As I began my demonstration, time seemed to slow. The first few techniques came out exactly as practiced. Precise, powerful, perfect. Yet with each movement, a profound emptiness echoed through my soul. I saw it reflected in the master's eyes. They weren't witnessing the true art of combat. They were watching a beautifully constructed cage, a prison of perfection. In that crushing moment, as my supposedly perfect techniques rang hollow through the hall, something extraordinary happened. A truth struck me with the force of a lightning bolt, one that would shatter everything I thought I knew about mastery. What I discovered in that moment of crisis, what I now call the broken rhythm, didn't just transform my martial arts. It revolutionized my entire understanding of how to master any skill, any art, any endeavor in life. This secret I'm about to share with you. It's not just another technique or method. No, what you're about to learn will crack open the very foundation of how you approach mastery itself. It is the difference between being a skilled practitioner and becoming truly unstoppable. The truth is, my friend, most people will spend their entire lives trapped in the same cage I found myself in that day. But you're about to learn how to break free. Let me share with you a truth that most teachers will never tell you. A truth I discovered through years of blood, sweat, and countless hours of deep reflection. You see, most people believe mastery comes from perfect repetition. They spend years performing the same movements, following the same patterns, reading the same books. They become technically proficient, yes, but there is no life in their actions, no power, no truth. I learned this lesson in the most painful way possible. Early in my teaching days in Oakland, I had a student, technically gifted, physically stronger than most. He could replicate every movement I showed him with remarkable precision. One day I asked him to spar with a less experienced student. Despite his perfect form, he was defeated. Why? Because he had learned the moves, but not the meaning. He had the motion, but not the emotion. This, my friend, is what I call the gap between movement and mastery. You see, true mastery isn't about performing actions with mechanical precision. It's about expressing yourself honestly through your chosen craft. When I punch, it is not just my fist that strikes. It is my entire being, my emotional content, my very essence that flows through that movement. Think about this. Have you ever watched a musician who plays every note perfectly, yet fails to move your soul? Or perhaps a painter who can recreate reality with perfect technique, yet their art feels empty. This is the same phenomenon. They have mastered the form, but missed the essence. The truth that most people can't accept is this: technical perfection is nothing but a beautiful cage if it doesn't contain what I call emotional content. This emotional content, this deep, honest, raw expression of your true self, this is what transforms mere movement into true mastery. You might be wondering, but Bruce, what exactly is this emotional content? Now you're asking the right question. And this is where our real journey begins. There is a truth about the human mind that I discovered through years of research and experimentation. A truth that modern science is only now beginning to understand, but which the ancient masters knew intuitively. When you practice a movement, any movement, you are not just training your muscles. You are creating what I call a neural bridge. Think of it like this. Every time you repeat an action, you are laying down another stone in this bridge. Most people believe that simply adding more stones, more repetitions, will lead to mastery. But this is where they go wrong. I remember spending countless hours watching how different animals fight. The cobra's strike, the mantis's precision, the tiger's power. Each one perfect in its own way. But what fascinated me wasn't their techniques. It was how they learned them. They never simply repeated movements. Their learning was always tied to survival, to emotion, to real purpose. This observation led me to develop what you might call the neural bridge method. You see, the problem with traditional practice is not the practice itself. It's the disconnect between physical action and emotional engagement. When you practice without purpose, without emotional investment, you're building a bridge that leads nowhere. Let me explain what happens in most people's journey. They start with enthusiasm, make quick progress, and then plateau. They hit what feels like an invisible wall. You know this feeling, don't you? The more they practice, the less they improve. Why? Because they built their neural bridge on hollow ground. Consider this. When a tiger cub learns to hunt, every practice session is filled with purpose, with emotion, with real consequence. There is no meaningless repetition. Every attempt builds not just skill, but understanding, awareness, and what I call emotional memory. This is why so many practitioners remain stuck in mediocrity. They separate their physical practice from their emotional core. They try to master the physical while neglecting the spiritual, the emotional, the mental aspects of their art. They practice with their bodies, but leave their hearts and minds behind. The neural bridge method I developed combines all these elements. It's not just about connecting your mind to your body. It's about creating a unified channel through which your entire being can express itself. When you punch, it shouldn't just be your fist moving through air. It should be your entire existence expressing itself through that single point of contact. Think about the last time you felt truly alive while practicing your craft. That moment when time seemed to stop, when everything flowed naturally. That wasn't just physical proficiency. That was your neural bridge functioning at its highest level, connecting your emotional content with your physical expression. Now I will share with you the heart of this method, what I call rhythmic mastery. But remember, my friend, knowing is not enough. You must apply. Willing is not enough. You must do. The secret lies in 3 fundamental pillars. When united, create something far greater than their sum. Let me share with you what took me decades to understand. The first pillar is conscious disruption. Most people become slaves to their patterns, but true mastery requires you to break free. I discovered this while developing Jeet Kune Do. One day while training, I deliberately began making mistakes in my forms. Not random errors, but conscious disruptions of my learned patterns. what happened next was extraordinary. My mind became more alert, more alive. Every movement became a new discovery. Think of it like this. When you walk into your home in complete darkness, you become intensely aware of every step, every sensation. Your mind awakens. This heightened state of consciousness, this is where true learning begins. This is where you transcend mere technique and discover real understanding. The second pillar is emotional integration. This goes beyond simply feeling passionate about your practice. When I punch, I don't just execute a movement. I express an emotional truth. Every action must carry what I call emotional content. During my early days in Hong Kong, I noticed how the most powerful practitioners weren't necessarily the most technically. They were the ones whose movements carried authentic emotional weight. I remember teaching a student who was a professional musician. He could not grasp a particular technique until I asked him to approach it like playing music. Don't just move, I told him. Express yourself like you do through your instrument. In that moment, everything changed. His movements transformed from rigid technique to fluid expression. The third pillar is formless adaptation. Water, my friend, becomes the cup, becomes the bottle, becomes the teapot. It takes the shape of whatever contains it, yet always remains true to its nature. This is how your mastery must be. I've applied this principle not just in martial arts, but in acting, in writing, in every aspect of life. Let me show you how these pillars work together. When I trained in my early days, I would begin with a standard technique, let's say a simple straight punch. Through conscious disruption, I would deliberately vary the rhythm, speed, and angle. Through emotional integration, I would infuse each variation with different emotional qualities, sometimes fierce like a tiger, sometimes fluid like water. Through formless adaptation, I would let go of all preconceptions and allow my expression to take whatever form the moment required. But this method extends far beyond combat. I've seen painters use it to break through creative blocks, entrepreneurs to innovate in stagnant markets, musicians to discover their unique voice. One of my students, a surgeon, told me how applying these principles transformed his approach to complex procedures. The psychology behind is profound, yet simple. When you consciously disrupt your patterns, you force your mind to remain present. When you integrate emotion, you engage your entire being. When you adapt formlessly, you transcend the limitations of rigid thinking. Together, these elements create a state of dynamic mastery that continues to evolve. Now, let me show you how to integrate these principles into your daily practice. What I'm about to share isn't just theory. This is the method I use to develop my own skills and what I taught my most dedicated students. First, you must understand that true practice begins before you even move a muscle. Each morning I start with what I call the empty vessel ritual. I sit quietly for 5 minutes, emptying my mind of all preconceptions about my art. This isn't meditation, it's preparation for honest expression. Here's your daily framework. Begin with what you know best. Take your most practiced technique, your most familiar skill. Now introduce controlled chaos in 3 stages. In stage 1, you deliberately disrupt your own rhythm. If you're a martial artist, change the timing of your strikes. If you're a musician, alter the tempo of your most familiar piece. If you're a painter, use your non-dominant hand. The goal isn't to perform well, It's to shock your system out of complacency. But here's where most practitioners fail. They try to control this chaos. Don't. Let me share a story. I once had a student, a master calligrapher, who struggled with this concept. His brushstrokes were perfect, but lifeless. I asked him to practice writing during a boat ride, letting the vessel's movement influence his strokes. At first, he resisted the unpredictability. But when he finally embraced it, his art transformed. The controlled chaos became his ally. Stage 2 is what I call emotional alchemy. Choose an emotion, anger, joy, serenity, fear, and let it flow through your practice. But here's the crucial point. Don't act the emotion, become it. When I train, I don't pretend to be like water. I am water. This isn't metaphorical, it's practical application. The third stage is formless integration. This is where most people struggle, so listen carefully. Take your disrupted rhythm and your emotional content, and now, let go of all technique. Yes, completely let go. Allow your practice to become pure expression. No names, no forms, no styles, just honest, spontaneous movement. Let me warn you about the pitfalls. The first is the ego's resistance. Your mind will try to return to what's comfortable, to what it knows. This is normal. The second is frustration with seeming lack of progress. Remember, chaos feels like regression to the organized mind. Here's how you overcome these challenges. Create what I call chaos checkpoints in your practice. Every 5 minutes, deliberately break whatever pattern you've established. If you find yourself getting comfortable, that's your signal to disrupt. For rapid skill acquisition, follow this daily sequence. 5 minutes of empty vessel preparation, 10 minutes of technical practice in your chosen skill, 15 minutes of rhythmic disruption, 10 minutes of emotional integration, 20 minutes of formless expression. But remember this crucial point. The time intervals are less important than your total commitment to each phase. Some days, you might spend hours in one phase. That's fine. What matters is your honesty in the practice. I'll share with you a secret I discovered. The moment you think you've mastered a phase, switch to something completely different. If you're practicing punches, switch to kicks. If you're painting landscapes, switch to portraits. The principle remains the same, but the context changes. This prevents the illusion of mastery through familiarity. What I'm about to share with you now goes far beyond the realm of physical combat or technical mastery. The principles we've discussed, they are universal laws that govern all forms of human excellence. Let me tell you about James, one of my students in Oakland. He wasn't a fighter. He was a businessman facing a crucial decision about his company's future. He came to me seeking clarity, not combat training. I taught him to apply the principle of formless adaptation to his decision-making process. Instead of rigidly following business protocols, he learned to flow like water, adapting his strategies to changing market conditions. Within 6 months, his business had doubled in size. But perhaps more remarkable was Sarah, a painter who studied with me briefly. She was technically brilliant, but felt trapped by her own expertise. I showed her how to apply conscious disruption to her art. Paint like water, I told her. Let your emotions flow through the brush without resistance. Today, her work hangs in galleries across the country. She found her unique voice not by adding more technique, but by learning to express her emotional content honestly. The most profound transformation I've witnessed was in personal relationships. When you truly understand these principles, you realize that every conversation is a form of sparring, every relationship a dance of energy. One of my students, a troubled marriage counselor, began applying the principle of emotional integration to his therapy sessions. Instead of following rigid counseling protocols, he learned to adapt like water, flowing with his clients' emotional states. His success rate tripled. Your mind, you see, is not separate from your body. When you master these principles physically, you're actually training your consciousness. I've seen business leaders use the empty vessel technique before crucial negotiations. Artists using rhythmic disruption to break through creative blocks. Scientists applying formless adaptation to their research methods. Consider this. When a CEO makes a decision, are they not expressing their emotional content through business strategy? When a mother handles a difficult situation with her child, is she not adapting like water to flow around resistance? When a surgeon performs a complex procedure, are they not expressing formless mastery through their instruments? This is why I tell you, these principles are not techniques to be learned, but truths to be understood. In my own journey beyond martial arts, into acting and philosophy, I discovered that success in any field comes from the same source. The ability to honestly express your truth while remaining formless like water. The mind that is fluid, that can break its own patterns, that can integrate emotion with action. This mind can achieve anything. I've seen musicians transcend their instruments. Speakers captivate audiences without saying a word. Leaders transform organizations through silent example. All through these same principles we've discussed. Let me return to that moment in Hong Kong, where this journey of discovery began. Standing before those masters, I had felt the emptiness of perfect technique without soul. But now, my friend, you understand what I discovered that day. That true mastery isn't about perfection, but about honest expression. You see, emotional content isn't just about feeling deeply. It's about allowing your true self to flow without obstruction. That day in Hong Kong, I stopped my demonstration midway, looked at the masters, and did something unprecedented. I threw away the planned routine and instead showed them not my techniques, but my truth. What followed wasn't just martial arts. It was pure expression of the human spirit. This is the ultimate secret I want to share with you. The path to mastery isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. When you integrate your physical skills with your emotional truth, when you allow your authentic self to flow like water, you transcend the boundaries between artist and art, between practitioner and practice. Right now, in this moment, you have everything you need to begin this journey. Don't wait for perfect conditions. Don't wait until you feel ready. The water doesn't wait to be perfect before it flows. It simply flows, adapting to whatever path it finds. Tomorrow, when you return to your craft, remember, let your first action be guided not by thought, but by honest feeling. Let your practice be an expression, not of what you think you should be, but of who you truly are. Break your patterns, embrace the chaos, flow like water. The ultimate aim of practice isn't to make perfect. It's to make whole, to unify body, mind, and spirit into one honest expression. This is what I mean by emotional content. This is what I mean by being like water. My friend, you're not just learning a technique. You're awakening to your own potential for genuine self-expression. The power I'm describing isn't something I can give you. It's something you already possess. Your task isn't to create it, but to uncover it, to let it flow naturally, honestly, completely. Remember, the cup becomes useful only when it is empty. Empty your cup of preconceptions, fill it with honest expression, and let your true self flow forth into everything you do. This is the way of water. This is the path to mastery. This is your journey, and it begins now.